Hey everybody, it's Andrew Martin from Andrew Martin Energy, bringing you your June energy update. Although the topic that we're going to talk about today and what I'm going to share actually is not just specific to where we are right now. I feel like this is the beginning of a very real physical experience of something that you have probably heard a lot about, something that I have talked about, something that many spiritual folks are focused on right now. And the word of the day is ascension. What is ascension? That is a really good question. And I have some insight for you. I have some perspectives for you that I'm going to share. I also have some tips. I have 3 things that I think are really, really useful for you right now. I'm going to be sharing those later in the video. Some practical stuff. As always, for me, it's about offering you tools to consciously and deliberately navigate your experience, to remember the truth of who you are, to recall your divine authority as the sovereign of your experience, and essentially lead you back to self. First of all, just give me a thumbs up, give me a heart emoji, give me a comment if things have felt particularly intense right now. We just finished those 2 eclipses. We had the lunar eclipse, the solar eclipse. We've got several big planets in retrograde right now. We're also moving towards the solstice. So I know right now is energetically, it's real. Girl, it is intense, it is palpable, it is physical, it is undeniable, it is not something that we can ignore. So let me know if that's been your experience lately. Also, I would love a subscription from you, so hit the subscribe button, click on the bell icon, and I am also back on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/andrewmartin.energy, just like my website, andrewmartin.energy. And I also have an amazing event coming up the 20th, this Sunday. It is the group energy healing for the month. The focus this month is love and wellness, which I know we could all say yes to more of that in our lives. I'll put all of the information in the description box below so that you can check all of that out. And I'm really, really excited to share with you today what exactly it is that we are going through right now. Girl, what the WTF? I know that has been my question, a lot lately, and I'm no newbie to this experience. I am certainly not unfamiliar with intense energy, and it's intense. Let's just put that out on the table. It is intense. It is often confusing. It can feel chaotic. It can feel lonely. It can feel isolating. Then the next minute, it can feel joyful and exciting and expansive and wonderful. It is like every peak and every valley possible and all points in between is kind of where we are right now. From my perspective, and I'm just going to put this out there, this is ascension, folks. I have a couple of things that I want to share with you which will help give you some context and frame what I mean by that. But yes, this is ascension. You are ascending. We are ascending. Humanity, the collective, the planet, all beings on, in, around the earth, and the rest of the universes and the galaxies and the multiverses. This is happening. It is a really big stone being thrown into a really big pond, creating some really, really big ripples. If you've been following me for a while, this is not the first time I've talked about this. If you have been paying attention to your own experience and have some sort of a spiritual framework and understanding, I know that you are aware of ascension and the ascension process. And I'm going to share with you briefly how I see things happening energetically. By the time we experience something in the physical, right, through the body, through the material world of the things we can touch and taste and smell and hear and see with our physical senses, by the time it arrives at the physical layer, it is something that has already been present energetically, which then moves into the emotional experience, which then moves into the mental experience, and then finally it moves into the physical experience. So while you may have been on this path consciously for a while, and you may have been focused on ascension and doing your work to really connect with this experience for a while, where we are now is we are actually having the physical experience of it, the beginning of the physical experience of ascension. It's like that with everything. By the time something arrives in the physical form, we've already been thinking about it. We've already been talking about it. We've already been, feeling around it and feeling the experience of it. Now, whether we're consciously doing that or not is a topic for another day. However, suffice it to say that where we are right now, the reason, if we want to look at it that way, the reason for so much of what's happening to us in our physical experience is because we are ascending. We have been on that train for a while. We have been on this journey for a while, and now it's getting physical. So what is ascension? Essentially, ascension is the return to self with the capital S. This is how I see it, and I'm going to make this as simple as I can. There's the human self, the physical self, the self that we see in the mirror, the self that we engage with, the self that we would call the person or the human or the personality or Andrew, whatever your name is. There's the physical self, which is like the iceberg. And it is, the little part of the iceberg that we see above the water is the physical self. And then there is the rest of the iceberg. There's the part of the iceberg that we don't see, the part of the iceberg that isn't necessarily visible to the naked eye. And that is the rest of us. That is the trans-physical self, the non-physical self, the higher self. I call it the creator self, whatever it is that you want to call that, the soul, the spirit. That's really the focus of ascension, is the union of the trans-physical self or the big self with the human self or the little self. Now, little is not a judgment. It's not an insult to say the little self. It's just looking at it from a percentage thing, right? 10% of you is in physical and 90% of you is in the trans-physical or the not physical, or the part that we can't see with the naked eye. And the self with the capital S is all of that. The self with the small s is the identity. Andrew is the small self, the small part of the fullness of all that I am. Are you with me? Essentially, ascension is return to self with the capital S. It is the unification of the physical and the trans-physical selves. It is essentially the resurrection. Think of, all of the avatars, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Krishna, all of the big avatars, these big spiritual avatars that are the representation of what the ascension resurrection process is. They all have an experience of death. They all have an experience of leaving the corporeal form, leaving the material form, and then coming back with this new, awakened, enlightened, aware perspective on the truth of who and what they are. If you're interested, Freddie Silva, I love this book, The Lost Art of Resurrection. He talks a lot about what the actual act of resurrection is. And to me, ascension and living resurrection are essentially the same thing. It is coming to the fullness of self, the understanding of who and what you really are, the reclamation of your divinity, of your sovereignty, of your authority, as the master creator of your experience, as the one who has created it all. This is where that statement that everything you have ever experienced, you have created. It has been chosen on some level. And often when we present that statement, the response is, well, I wouldn't choose that. No, the human may not have chosen it, but you are not just human, my dear. There is so much more to you than just the human physical self. Now, this time around, because we're going through ascension while in form, the human physical self is where the party is, right? It must have a physical lens this time around. We're not getting the death experience. We're not getting the luxury of being, put in the cave and being dead for 3 days and then coming back and being resurrected. We're going through the entirety of this process while we are in form, while we are in physicality, so that we can have a front row, first-hand, real-time experience of our awakening, of our ascension, and of our resurrection. That is essentially what I see ascension as. It's coming back to self. It's coming back to self with the capital S. It's coming back to truth with the capital T. It's coming back to remembrance with the capital R. I can't really make an R with it. Oh, is that R? I think that's R in sign language, so I'll do the R. That's what it is, my friends. It is the reawakening of all that you are consciously, and eventually you reach that place of integration and realization where it is all happening internally within the physical body, within the physical vessel. One of the things I think it is most important to really understand about the ascension process, it is not a destination. Certainly we are destined for heightened versions of reality, clearer versions of reality, new, exalted, rarefied, crystalline experiences of what it is to be a human, of what it means to live on the planet through a physical body. Certainly, we will reach these very heightened, beautiful, wonderful pinnacle peak states. However, it is not only a singular destination. There is no finish line. This is the truth. Source only ever seeks one thing, and that is expansion through experience. That is an infinite endless process. So think of it like this. Just like a flower doesn't go from seed to blossom, there's a process, right? You plant the seed, then there's the germination, then there's the tending to it, then there's the stage where it's growing its leaves and growing its foliage, then there's the bud stage, then there's the flower stage, then there's the seed stage, then there's the death process, right? When it gets recycled back into the entirety of the ecosystem. So that's sort of what Ascension is like. It is a whole process. There's very little in this universe that is instantaneous. Now, certainly we have these peak experiences and we often have these moments. And I know, raise your hand, leave me a comment if you have had those peak awakening moments where it's like, whoa, what just happened? Something just shifted, something just opened up, something just changed. I might have just had an internal knowing. It might have been a very real experience, like seeing an orb or seeing a ship or seeing another being. So certainly there are those pinnacle peak moments, but they don't just happen out of nowhere. There's always a build up to them. It's a place that we get to eventually, and eventually we move through it and keep expanding beyond it. Think of it like a road trip. If you were driving from Los Angeles to New York, certainly you're going to arrive at your destination eventually. Certainly there's an intention to reach a specific place. However, on the journey, you're experiencing new levels of awareness. You're experiencing new environments. You're learning things about yourself. You're meeting people. You're having unexpected experiences. You're maybe taking detours. You're maybe taking side trips. Maybe you get a flat tire. Maybe you decide to spend a little bit longer in one place. Also, think of the preparation for the trip. That is part of it. Thinking about where you want to go, planning your route, gathering your supplies, packing your stuff, renting the car, or getting all packed into the car. What I think is really important when we're thinking about and talking about Ascension is to release the idea that it is a singular moment or experience. You are always in a state of becoming. You are always in a state of expansion and growth. It is an eternal, infinite fractal expression of consciousness. It is re-expression, it is redesign, it is re-emergence, it is reconnection, it is resurrection. It is also not hierarchical. It is also not linear. We don't necessarily go from A to B to C. Think of it like a sphere inflating itself, right? And as this sphere inflates itself, all parts of it grow and expand. So as you reach new levels of awareness and your consciousness goes higher, so too do your roots deepen. As you begin to remember more of who you are, your sense of self becomes deeper. It becomes more profound. It becomes more deeply rooted into your physical experience. Because again, everything that we are experiencing this time around requires a physical lens. So just think of it as an expansion through different layers of awareness. And if you were inflating yourself 360 degrees using, the planet as your center point, even as you expand up into the atmosphere, there's different layers of atmosphere. Each of them have their own quality, their own flavor, their own part of an experience. So that really is what Ascension is. It is moving beyond what we have known before as we come back to the self in a way that really has never been done this way before. So you may be experiencing physical symptoms because just like as you move into different layers of awareness and deeper layers of understanding, it changes your perspective, it changes your beliefs. And as you mentally and emotionally begin to shift and process it, then that too creates a shift in the physical body. So we often talk about ascension symptoms. That is simply the physical body going through its own process of dropping what no longer serves, dropping what is no longer true, and really moving into a clearer, more defined sense of self and truth. Again, self with the big S and truth with a capital T. What do I mean by truth with a capital T? This is how I see it. There's little t truth, which is a temporary truth. An example of that would be I am Andrew. I am only Andrew for a specific amount of time. Who knows how long this lifetime is going to be? I have a sense I'm going to be several hundred years old before I exit this body. However, Andrew is not an eternal truth. Andrew is a temporary experience that my creator self has chosen to learn and grow and expand through. But a capital T truth would be love is unconditional from the source perspective. Neutrality is essentially our innate way of being. Source is always expanding and growing and creating. The only claim the divine ever makes is I am. These are capital T truths because they're eternal. They're always true, right? So that's what I mean when I'm talking about little t truth and big T truth. Same thing with the little s self is, again, Andrew is the small s self, and the big self with the capital S is Andrew and all the rest of me. Think of it like this. Andrew is a chapter in a book. And so Andrew is one part of a much larger story, which we could call the Akash of my soul, the Akash of my creator self, or my oversoul. Essentially, it's understanding that these smaller experiences that we have within a larger experience are just part of the picture. So here are some things that you might be experiencing right now, along with the physical symptoms. Things are returning. You're going to see old relationships coming back around. You're going to see old beliefs, old patterns, and old ways of being coming back around. You may see ideas that you thought were dead and gone, things that you were thinking about, things that you were inspired about, things that perhaps you were working on and then just said, I can't do it right now, or I'm discarding this, or I'm letting it go entirely. These things are coming back around. You know, I say this quite often, is just because we lose something in our spiritual experience and on our spiritual journey doesn't necessarily mean it's gone forever. Sometimes it has to die in its current form so that it can be reborn. Now, here's the thing. Don't go into fear if old ways of being, old patterns, old habits, old beliefs, even old people or old situations return. It's not coming back because you haven't done your work. It's not coming back because you're being punished or you did something wrong. It's coming back because you have new information about it. It's coming back because now you have an opportunity to see it more clearly, to see it with a deeper sense of compassion, to see it with a greater sense of love and acceptance. It's essentially layers of self, layers of you coming home, and all they really want, all they ever really need is for you just to see them as they are, to open your arms to them, put your arms around and say, baby, welcome home. I love you. Now, this doesn't mean that old yahoos and old dysfunctional characters and chaotic behaviors necessarily get a free pass. Oftentimes things come back so that we can reassert a healthier boundary around them and say, oh yes, I remember you. I remember you. You're welcome to come back, but you got to understand this is how we do things now. Those old ways of being, those old ways of seeing ourselves and others aren't necessarily applicable. And it's essentially saying, again, this is the benevolent masculine asserting itself. The benevolent masculine says, baby, you got 400 acres and you can run wild, you can run free, you can do whatever you want. However, you have to know there's a fence. There's a boundary. And there are certain limits to behavior. There are certain places we just don't go anymore because it's not moving us forward. It's not moving us beyond where we have been. And if it's taking us backwards, if it's moving us back into old patterns and old behaviors because we're afraid, because we don't want to do it, because we don't think we're ready, that's where things get a little wonky and a little bit wobbly. So here's a prompt I have for you. When old choices, old behaviors, old patterns and beliefs reemerge or rear their head again, simply ask yourself, would the version of me that I am becoming say yes to this? Essentially, it's like saying, okay, future me, the life that I dream of, the life that I envision, the version of my world that I am actively, deliberately, and consciously creating, the version of me that inhabits that experience, would they say yes to it? There's also a journaling exercise you can do where essentially you're writing a letter to your future self, right? You sit down, hey, Andrew, 6 months from now, how are things going in what would 6 months from now be, December? Hey, Andrew, in December of 2021, man, I have so many questions. Where are we going? How did we get there? What can I do? This is where I am and this is what I want to know. And then you can turn around and write a response back from your future self and say, hey baby, I'm so glad you wrote to me. This is what I want you to know. This is an automatic writing exercise and I find it to be very, very useful. There's another thing that I think is important for us to acknowledge. This isn't necessarily healing. Certainly there will be aspects still requiring healing. Certainly there will be parts of us that still maybe need a little bit of work, a lot of love and a lot of acceptance. However, what this is really about is this is about integration. That's why these parts of ourself are coming back, because we finally have the capacity to hold them. We finally have the depth of self and the understanding of who and what we really are to say yes to these parts of ourselves and include them back into our inner landscape. A lot of this is really shadow work, right? Shadow work is so important because what it does is it provides us with a way to understand and accept these parts of ourselves that are often really difficult or challenging. Now, the key with shadow work is we understand the chaos part of ourselves. We understand the part of us that really is unbridled and untamed. However, we don't necessarily let that layer of self drive the bus and make all the decisions. It's necessary for the fullness of who we are to embrace our chaotic shadow selves. However, it's also important to, again, assert those benevolent boundaries and say, yeah, baby, you're welcome. I'm glad you're here. And you're not the one that gets the keys to the car. There's another thing that's important to reiterate here about the shadow, and this is one of the 3 tips I have for you in this video. The shadow isn't necessarily something that needs to be healed, it just needs to be accepted. There are parts of you that were born to thrive in the darkness. There are parts of you that were made to thrive in the shadows. Think of nocturnal animals. They are adept at moving through the underbrush, moving through the jungle, moving through the forest when there's no light. Think of shade-loving plants. These plants actually thrive in the shade. They need the shadow, and they don't really do well in the direct sunlight. It's just like the parts of you that are adept at that chaotic, that deep sort of watery sense of the shadow, that unformed sort of, it's amorphous. It's sometimes hard to put your finger on, and it doesn't necessarily always present itself as very clear sense of self. It's often a feeling thing. It's often a very subtle, intuitive, energetic thing. So it's important to know that not necessarily are we trying to heal all of the parts of shadow. The first step is just accepting them. The first step is just integrating them. And I'm going to put a link to a video here to one of my favorite tips for shadow work. Super simple, super quick tip that I'll share with you, and I'll put that link up here. So as we are healing and as we are integrating these parts of self, what is important to understand is this requires an unplugging from the external world. And this is what I mean by that. We are no longer living in an experience where it is the outside world that dictates who and what we are. It is not necessarily the outside world that tells us when to be productive, how to be productive, and what success looks like. As these layers of self return and as we integrate them, one of the big things that happens is we return to our own natural rhythms. We return to our own natural state of being, right? We begin to see that, oh, actually, I work really, really well when I don't have a plan. I work really, really well more intuitively, more organically. I like to start with an abstract idea and then I just move into it and I experience it. Or we're finding that actually I do like more structure. I do like more of a plan. Or I don't want to just have one job or one part of my business or one focus. I like to do a myriad of things. Whatever it is, as long as it is an internal emanation, you can trust it. Osiris has said this quite a lot lately, is that in order to be granted access back into the natural world, one must return to their natural state of being. In other words, you must be this tall to ride this ride. Now, this is not from an exclusionary standpoint. This is not saying, oh, sorry, honey, you can't sit with us. It's not that kind of thing. It's essentially you, from that highest perspective, the creator self, the self with the big S, really knows what is necessary and what is required to exist and to thrive in these higher states of awareness and these higher states of being and these higher states of energy. So it's really looking at it from a point of integrity, and disintegration is the opposite of integrity, right? When I am out of integrity, I am disintegrated. And I've been saying this over and over, and I'm going to say it one more time. This time around on the planet, it is required that we go through it from a physical lens. We've got to live it. We've got to feel it. We've got to experience through our physical, body, through this scuba suit, essentially, that we were given when we came down into the density of the planet. Now our scuba suit is ascending. The lighted ones have been saying this from the beginning, that essentially what you are going through right now is you are riding a bicycle and then deciding to rebuild your bicycle into a sports car while you are riding it. So this is no small feat. So remember this and go easy on yourself. In order for the material self, which is the mind, the body, the emotions, and the energy, to really be in integrity through the duration of this process, it has got to be maintained at a certain level. It's like swimming lessons. You know, your swimming instructor is not going to let you swim in the deep end or not going to let you swim in the rough surf or in the choppy rapids until you're ready. It's the same thing with your creator self and the fullness of all that you are that is lovingly guiding you through this process until you are ready to really maintain the integrity of self, including your physical body, in these higher states of being. You are not going to completely open the door, right? You might have an experience of, one toe into the water and then you pull back and you integrate. And then the next time you go in, you spend a few more minutes in the water and then you come out and you integrate. It's the same thing. You're going to have these peak experiences where suddenly everything makes sense and everything is clear. And then it often feels like you kind of come crashing back down. It's a process. It is slowly exposing you, the fullness of you, to these higher states of being, higher states of awareness and being, so that you can maintain yourself within them. What I know about this from my own perspective is when you are first waking up and you're first going through this ascending process and this integration of the non-physical or trans-physical self with the physical self, it would blow your circuits, girl. It's like putting a 400-watt light bulb in a teeny tiny little bedside lamp. It's just going to blow the circuits and blow the wiring. You will only grant yourselves these experiences when you can handle them, when you are able to maintain yourself within them, when you've done the inner work to clear the space for these higher states to integrate and to be realized within form, and when you're able to also handle them mentally, emotionally, and energetically. So it's got to be all layers of self have got to be able to maintain this and maintain integrity and cohesion. Otherwise, you're just going to be a mess. Otherwise, you're just going to be blown apart. And that negates the whole point of doing it this time around while in the physical body. So your key to these experiences lies in your willingness to fully accept and embrace all that you are. And the number one way you can do this is simply through curiosity. This is actually a bonus one. I'm going to give you 4 tips. So tip number 2 is the only thing that is required for this ascension process is your willingness and your curiosity. Your willingness to say yes, your willingness to allow, your willingness to feel, your willingness to let go, your curiosity about what is this layer of self? What is the message here? What does this part of me want to know? What is that feeling that I get when I'm looking at this or thinking about these things? Why do I feel, conflicted or twisted inside when I'm looking at these old states of being? So it's essentially when it doesn't make sense from your human level of awareness, it is because the pieces are being moved from your higher state. So it's essentially your creator self saying, yep, he's ready for this. Yep, she's ready for that experience. So she may not be aware of it consciously what's happening. She may have an experience of going, oh my God, what the hell just happened? But you can trust that you're being taken there because there is value in the experience. So here are 2 more tips for you to make it through this process, not only this month, but just as we go down the road. Number 1 is a practice that I call fire writing. And this is a really, really good practice when you're wanting to clear old subconscious patterns, you're wanting to release old beliefs and stories and narratives, and it goes like this. Hang on. So here's how you're going to do it. You're going to get something to write on, just a piece of notebook paper, something to write with, a pen. I like to use the red pen when I'm doing fire writing because to me it's emblematic of fire. And here's what happens. This is the process that you can perceive as occurring when you're doing this practice. Whatever narrative it is, whatever story, let's say the story, and it's generally obviously a negative one that we want to release, right? It's a limiting one. Let's just say we're talking about love and relationships, and the story is I'm unlovable, no one's ever going to love me, and I'm going to be single forever, I'm going to die alone. So whatever this story is, whatever this narration is, when you find that it's present, when you find that you've been sort of repeating and going through the Groundhog Day of this old belief, basically you take a second, you just kind of find your breath, you find that connection, and you activate that story. You think about this old belief that says, I'm unlovable, no one's ever going to love me, I'm going to be alone forever, I'm going to be single forever, I'm going to die alone. And you activate it as much as you can. Get yourself worked up, maybe even get yourself a little emotional or allow the emotions to rise, and then you're going to write it. You're going to write the story in first person, as the active believer, and you're going to write that down. I am ugly. I am unlovable. I am stupid. No one's ever going to love me. I'm going to die alone. Love is just not for me. I'm never going to have it. I'm going to, die alone, and my cats are going to eat my face, whatever it is. And you just write. And you write and you write and you write, and you let this venom, essentially, this poison of this old belief, just move from the mind, from the body, down your arm, down the pen, where it becomes a physical word through ink on the page. You're going to write until you feel you've depleted it or exhausted that well for now. Sometimes you have to do this practice multiple times for it to really take effect. But it's instantaneous, it's an immediate. So you just write until you feel like you've squeezed the juice out of that fruit for now. Then you rip out the page or pages, write as many as you need, and then you burn it. Obviously, you're going to do this in a place that's safe. I'll do it in a metal can or in the sink or in the bathtub, and you're just going to burn these pages. And the sense of what happens here is the conscious mind and the subconscious mind are witnessing the physical burning of this page. And you know that what happened was it went from an idea or a story or, of energetic vibration, and then you turned it into something physical when you put it on the page. And burning it symbolizes the end of it. Burning symbolizes that it is done. And then you can take those ashes and you can bury them, you can scatter them to the wind, you can put them in the water, flush them down the toilet, whatever. Just finding a way to dispose of them that feels appropriate. That I have found to be a super, super powerful exercise that I call fire writing. And I think it's one of the quickest ways these days that we can release old stuff, especially patterns that maybe we're aware of, but like, God, I just don't know why I can't get rid of this idea or this thought. Try this practice and see if it works. And I would love you to leave me a comment or let me know how it works for you. This is your fourth tip. This is one that, may be controversial for some of you, but it's one that I see time and time again as so crucial. Stop banishing shit. What I mean by that, and I, have done this in the past too. Essentially, there's a funky energy or this part, this aspect of self that makes us uncomfortable, or we see something that looks scary, or we're like, oh God, I don't want that, that dirty, shady energy in my space. And so we just send it away. We send it out there. We send it away, send it back to source. This is the equivalent of a leaf blower. And if you've watched me for some time, you know how I feel about leaf blowers, girl. A leaf blower is the epitome of laziness. It is the epitome of me not being willing to do my work. Essentially, I'm just taking stuff, I'm blowing it across the street, then I get to, dust my hands and feel satisfied because I've done something. No, you haven't. You haven't done shit. All you did was blow it across the street into your neighbor's yard and make it someone else's responsibility. And I guarantee you, the next morning, what's going to happen? He or she is going to blow it back across the street right back into your yard. It's the same thing with these aspects and energies that we are banishing. Where are you sending it, girl? What are you doing with it? Everything is all within the one. It all exists within source. It's like thinking that I can dump toxic stuff into the ocean and then go swimming in the ocean and it's not going to affect me. Don't be a leaf blower. Don't just banish it. This is key. Because one of the major aspects of ascension is accountability and responsibility for the things that you have created. And what I see time and time again is these aspects are coming to us because it is in part our responsibility to heal them. So rather than just banishing it, heal it and then send it to its perfect place. And I'm going to share a really quick healing with you. So here's how you do it. So let's say there's something in your space externally or something in your space internally. You're like, oh, that feels funky. I don't know if I like that. I'm not really sure if that's something that I want to hang on to or integrate. So here's what you do. You begin by taking a few deep breaths, calling in whatever avatars, whatever masters, whatever beings that you work with. I usually call in my creator self. Sometimes I'll call in Shiva or Kuan Yin. Sometimes I call in Archangel Michael. And essentially I ask them to be present while I'm healing. Then I wrap the entirety of my field in light. And I see this as like I'm standing in a sphere because that's how I see energy. It's like a geometric sphere in, 360 degrees around, radiating out from my center. And so I wrap my sphere in light. I leave a little teeny hole at the top of my field for the healed aspect to be released. But I wrap myself in light, leaving a little hole at the top. What I do then is I I visualize whatever aspect, the thought, the belief, the entity, the little, creepy crawly, whatever it is, I wrap it in light and within my field, right? I'm not trying to banish it. I'm keeping it within my field. So wrap myself in light, wrap the little being or the energy in light, and I tell it, you are forgiven. You are blessed. I am grateful for your presence. Whatever purpose this has served, because you may not always get the why, that's okay. You can just trust that this thing is here because it needs to be healed, and you, as the master sovereign, have the capacity to heal it, right? So you wrap it in light, you tell it is forgiven, you tell it that it is released. You may want to ask it if it has any information for you. Is there a message you have for me? Is there something you need me to know? Wait and see what you receive. And then after it's wrapped in light, then you ask your partner, let's say it's Shiva in this case, you say, Shiva, please release any cords or connections or contracts between myself and this being. You wait for that sense of the release to happen. And then you simply say, please escort it back to its perfect place. It is healed, it is whole, it is done. And then you visualize it being taken out the top of your field. Wait a couple more seconds. You can feel it leaving. You can feel it going. Thank Shiva. Thank the being that you're working with, whoever it is. Allow yourself to sort of feel. You can go back into your body, see if there are any spots that need to be filled with light. If there are, you can do that, right? Okay, so maybe you feel it in your gut and you say, okay, fill that space with light. Fill that space with truth. Once you feel things come to a settled point, then you're done. So it's really, really easy. And I know there's a million ways you can do this. The point of this is don't make your stuff someone else's responsibility. If there's something in your space, there's a reason. If there's something going on internally, there's a reason. And often the reason is it just is ready to be healed. Here's how I see these aspects of self or these beings or these entities. I just see them as a lost child. I just see them as a being who got lost on their way to something, and they were attracted to my bright, shiny light. So they just went to the brightest thing they could find, and they chose me, and they're just lost. They're not out to get me. They're not creepy crawly. They're not dangerous. They're not scary. They're just here because they need something, and I can give it to them. Healing is quite simple. It doesn't have to be super complicated. It doesn't have to be super complex. And however you do it, this is what is key. Heal it, and then request that it be sent to its perfect place. Don't just banish it and say, get out of here, send it away, send it to source. Think of it as we are all drinking from the same well. And whatever you're pouring into that well, even if you're just banishing it and wanting to get rid of it, if you're sending it out there unhealed, you're not doing anyone any good. So this is your opportunity to be of service to the collective by healing something before you send it back to its perfect place. And if you don't feel like you have the capacity to do that, then that's when you call in Shiva, Archangel Michael, whatever beings you work with. I hope that this has helped. Ascension is a huge, huge topic. We could go on for days, but essentially it is the unification of you with you, the embodiment of that within the physical vessel. It is a huge process. It is an eternal process. And even once we reach that rarefied state, if we want to call it 5D, if we want to call it fifth dimensional living, even that at some point is going to become the place that we stand on. This was a teaching that the Lighted Ones used a lot in the beginning, was it's just like climbing a ladder. And as you're climbing the ladder of your experience, the rung that you are reaching for will inevitably be the rung that you are standing on. So really allow yourself to see beyond this idea of a destination. Allow yourself to see beyond this idea of a linear beginning and ending point. You are eternal. You are infinite, and so is your experience. So while we are in a chapter that is really, really big, really, really powerful, and really, really important, it is no more or less important or big or powerful as the other parts of our experience. So yeah, be here, be focused, be present, do your work, but also just kind of let yourself off the hook that there's some place you got to get to. I promise you, whatever you have already decided to experience in this lifetime, it's going to happen one way or the other. And you can just allow yourself to be present, to be accountable, to be conscious and deliberate as you're along for the ride, but also know that it's an endless journey. You're going to be doing this forever. And whether it's in your current state or another state, that remains to be seen, but it's all you. It's all part of the experience. and it can all be joyful, wonderful, and mind-blowingly amazing if you let it. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. Again, you can go to my website, andrewmartin.energy, if you would like to book a session. Facebook now is andrewmartin.energy as well. If you have found this work to be of value, you can also consider making a donation. There's a donation page on my website, and those donations make a very real difference in my experience. I would love to see you on the 20th if you're up for the group healing event, again, Love and Wellness, on Sunday the 20th. Thank you as always for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. I love you. I'll see you soon. Mwah.